Okay, we're going to start our next session here for Windows, installing Windows. Everyone in? That's the only 5. All right, we'll get started. Overall, our main objectives for this is going to be able to name the differences between installing and upgrading an operating system. Describe the differences between attended and unattended installations. Name the key steps to install Windows, including the different ways to begin the process itself. And identify common pitfalls that can occur when installing it, and obviously be able to compare and contrast the upgrade requirements for each of the following windows. Obviously, there are many situations that will require you to install or upgrade. There's many different methods, as we are going to see, to perform an actual installation of Windows. We need to also understand the features and the differences between the OS versions, as well as the different additions within each version that will be beneficial be deciding in the actual installation of itself. We need to be able to also document what's vital when we're performing our actual upgrades or installs. And obviously, there are different boot methods available for installing or upgrading Windows itself. Lastly, after a computer OS upgrade is installed, there's additional steps usually that we need to do to ensure that the install and or upgrade is successful. So those we will be able to obviously review. Our behavioral skills that we're going to need, obviously, as we spoke about earlier, what Jordan pointed out, is persistence is one of them, right? Also, please note, for those that didn't see the actual materials for this, it's in the gray book, pages 953 through 997. Then it jumps from 1018 to 1034, and it jumps again to 1043 to 1058. I will be posting it in the little chat in case if you actually wanted to view the book and or read it while we're going through it. Any questions, doubts? Next slide. What do you think is the difference between installing and upgrading an operating system? Yeah, so you can see here, everybody pretty much saying that the whole OS is installed versus upgrade is obviously just either replacing or enhancing, depending which word you want to use, existing one. Obviously, when you do upgrade, though, from one OS to the other, you're going to have much more features, but not all operating systems allow you to smoothly migrate from one to the other. You have to have certain criteria, and that's one of the reasons why they give you those upgrade tools to be able to identify exactly what will be needed. As one person said, clean install, no traces in OS are kept, completely wiped out. That is the one where you want to just completely just put a brand new clean slate, as somebody said there, and erase everything that's in there. Will not keep any of your Word documents, no PowerPoint, nothing. An upgrade allows you to keep parts of the previous OS, such as the user accounts, their data, as I mentioned, and the apps that were installed previously. Obviously, depending on the situation, you have your upgrade, you have your clean install, you have a repair install, and you have a multi or dual boot as needed. Anyone ever know when I will be using a dual boot? Or what it means? Multi or dual boot?
When you want to have different operating systems working.
Correct. So when it first boots up, you'll have the option in a menu, say boot up with Windows Server, boot up with Windows, boot up with Linux, boot up with Mac, whatever it is, the operating systems that you have on separate partitions. You can make each partition bootable and choose it on the actual load up of the actual PC. And that's what the dual boot is, or multi-boot. Repair installation basically is just to resolve issues. So let's say something happened, your Windows became corrupted, but you don't want to upgrade it and you don't want to completely delete everything. So you could actually repair an actual install and it will recopy all system files and or necessary files to repair itself. Any questions on the 4 flavors here? Doubts? Next one. The types of installation. The attended, unattended, and remote install. Attended means that you actually are there physically attending to the actual install. You must answer every single question, click every single button for it to actually do it. And unattended though, this basically little to no human intervention. What they mean is usually you have a boot up disk or a bootable media, be of USB or optical drive, and you have a sysprep image. This is an image of a replica of another system. So it does have to be though that you use usually sysprep in the companies when they all have the exact same model. So everybody has the same HP model and going to continue to buy that for all desktops. Everybody has the exact same laptop. So then you can actually sysprep the image. Sysprep actually changes the SID, the security identifier of each operating system so that there is no duplicates. Therefore, there's no way that you can actually duplicate the actually security ID of a computer. Inside the unattended though, you also have the bootable media will answer all the questions that you needed to do in the unattended. This file contains all that information. The remote install allows several network installations, either unattended, sysprep, or whichever you have here. Only one at a time. Questions? Doubts? Okay. Next, the final checklist before installation includes checking the minimum hardware levels and system requirements have been achieved. Be that you're upgrading, installing, whatever it is, you must make sure that whatever the minimum requirements of that operating system is met. Obviously, we usually want more than the minimum because the minimum means the bare minimum so that it could actually function. The moment you start going under that bare minimum, you're going to start having problems. For instance, if you had the bare minimum of hard drive space, as soon as you start using it and saving files to your hard drive, you're going to start running out of space. You get an update, you start running out of space. So you have to be careful. Next slides, we'll obviously review the Windows 7, 8, 8.1, and 10's minimum installation requirements. First, Windows 7. Depending on the processor, you'll notice though, there's going to be a pattern throughout this whole thing here. So, processor, 1 gigahertz each is the minimum. The variance here, memory, 1 gig versus 2. Same thing, hard drive space, 16 versus 20. Both of them need the exact types of video. And as for mouse, keyboard, and internet access, is obviously required if you want to use it, right? If you want updates, if you want to be able to install the drivers from the intranet, which has the hardware list in there, you need access to the internet. Next is the Windows 8 and 8.1. You'll notice though, in this one, although it needs a 1 gigahertz processors, it requires the PAE, NX, and SSE support. Still the 1 and the 2, still the 16 and the 20. So your variance comes into the processor itself. Everything else is the same. Does anybody know what PAE means? support on a processor.
No, can't say that we do, Chief.
Does anybody remember what NX is? Guys don't remember what the NX processor does? Okay. I don't think we spoke about the SSE2. So PAE is a physical address extension, sometimes the same as page address extension. This is basically was introduced during the Pentium actual Pro. Main features obviously is that it enables access to 4 gigabytes of memory for compatible versions. It actually allowed the processors to be able to deal with it. Wasn't able to see that before. As for the NX, anybody remember what NX? Come on, you guys gotta remember the NX. I'm surprised you guys don't remember what the NX is.
I don't even remember going over that.
I don't remember.
The NX, that's the, you talking about the NX from?
AMD processors.
Oh yeah, that's the EDB thing. The that's for, have to do with stopping the malware, right?
Thank you. No execute. Stop. If he sees something that's weird, a code, and he looks to the side and says, whoa, that wasn't here before, nor do I remember anybody asking for this. He will actually, like you said, the DEP or the no execute will obviously stop and blocking the code from executing in the actual memory. Almost
They
like
can't remove it, right?
I'm sorry?
They can only stop it, but they can't remove it, right?
Correct. It could only help prevent it, but it's not going to remove it. So it'll still be there, but he'll just say, you could talk all you want, but I'm not going to do it. Just keep on yelling there. Do whatever you want there, but I'm not executing you. It's not removing the virus, but it is stopping it from actually executing it. Hey, you see, somebody remembered. The SSE2, I don't think we actually mentioned that one too much or even went into the deep into the process of that one. Does anybody actually know that one?
Oh,
That's a streaming one. That's the one that let's see. It's a later models of the Pentium processor, right? And it actually helps for the media files and the streaming of those big files themselves. It's one of the ways I can tell you understanding it. Some much more later ones that obviously allows for much bigger processing. Since it can do twice as much as the older models too. Any questions or doubts on that process? All right. Minimum requirements on the Windows 10. Any trend here you guys notice? What is it again?
1 gigahertz processor.
1 and 2, 16 and 20. So if you'll notice, 1 and 2, 16 and 20. 1 and 2, 16 and 20. 1 and 2, 16 and 20. All of them have it. The only variance comes into this Windows 8 where they support. It's not a must. Unless if you want it to work. Processor must have that capabilities. It leaves the later processors. All the new processors nowadays have that already integrated. They don't make a big spiel about it because obviously in those later models, that is most likely already in there, especially the virtual support for most of these processors. Any questions or doubts? For all of them need 1, 16 for the 13, 1, 2, and 20 for the 64-bit. Pretty much identical with that small little variance. Our boot methods for installing or upgrading. You have a DVD. Why don't I use a CD anymore?
I guess it's slower.
I'm sorry?
Slower.
Smaller, actually. That's our main issue with that. The size of the DVD is much bigger than a CD. I can put much more data in there. You should have seen when we used to install Windows 3.11, it was 24 diskettes. That was the most annoying thing to install. Imagine you losing one of those diskettes. Another way is our USB flash or solid state drive. You have a bootable USB with those features in there. You can enable it in the BIOS and it can actually do it. Your CD-ROM itself will use the newer Windows DVDs though. And lastly, Pixie Boots. Anybody know who's a Pixie Boot?
Isn't that like remote installation but on the network?
That is correct. Pixie Boot. You'll notice that if you have Pixie on your network enabled, the Pixie server, Windows inside of Windows pre-installation environment, when you come up and if the MAC address is available for an OS build, it will Pixie Boot and download the actual unintended install. Any questions? Doubts? How does he accomplish it? If you read there carefully, he installs what you can say a temporary OS within the RAM of that computer, and then proceeds to install the actual OS image to the hard drive itself. Questions or doubts or variances? Next one, NetBoot. This method was developed by Apple and allows the device to boot from a network location using DHCP. Then it receives the file from the Pixie server. Next, there's no question on that one. External or hot swappable drive. Similar to USBs, the external drive will contain the system installation files for the installation. A hot swappable technology allows this device to connect or disconnect without turning the system off. The external drive can be set to boot first in the BIOS. And then obviously it will look for the drive to install afterwards. Internal hard drive partition is one of the most common ones that we see now, because when we get our Dell or we get our HP or whatever, whoever we're buying it, if we're buying it from a given OEM manufacturer, they always nowadays have a separate partition with your actual boot files to install a clean original state image of that computer back to factory's default settings. Any questions on these three? So our boot methods for installing or upgrading, the key files that we require in case if you are creating a USB or one of these things, if you notice that it's not working, look for these files. And if these files are not in the actual device, then obviously it doesn't contain the right files in there. You will need a boot manager, BCD, the WinLoad.exe, the NT-OS kernel exe, the WinResume exe, your DLL, that is the HAL list, DLL, the SMSS executable, your Windows logon executable, and your LSASS executable. Those are all key files that must be in the actual boot media. Any questions on the files? your decisions to make during the actual installation. I stated, depending on how your company and or how you want to do it. A lot of people like to install the OS on its own partition. That obviously facilitates that if something happens, if the OS crashes, I'm not going to lose the other side, which will be a second partition where I contain all my files. Only problem was that a lot of people started creating these partitions too small, and then obviously they would run out of size. So you just got to make sure that you have plenty of size for all Windows updates and or anything that you're going to be installing onto Windows, because usually you want to install everything on that partition. All your programs installed there, the OS is installed there, but your actual documents and everything that you're going to save, you would save on that other partition. The administrative account settings, very key thing here. You got to be careful. Always create a brand new account that's not called administrator, that has administrators right. Keyword, I said administrators, which is a group, compared to administrator, which is a user. You would disable eventually the administrator, and you would also disable one more key account. Anybody know who's that other key account that you should be disabling?
Wouldn't that be root?
That would be in Linux, and I don't think you can disable root in Linux. And administrator is the root account. I'm looking for one more guy that usually Windows believes you should use or you should have there. Guest. Guest account.
Oh,
Guest account should be disabled. So should your administrator account. Those are the two easy ones that everyone knows. That's just as easy when you go, and I said in your routers or in your Internet of Things, when you leave that default user ID and password, you're giving them the first bullet, per se, into your system. Because if I know your ID, which is guest, or I know your ID, which is administrator, now I only have to pound the password. Don't have to guess two things anymore. I'm only gonna have to guess one. And to top it all off, administrative rights has administrative rights. When would you give somebody maybe guest rights? Ever?
I guess if they need to borrow the computer for whatever reason.
In your house, maybe you're saying?
I guess, or in the work environment. I don't know. It's just a very niche kind of thing.
In a work environment, a lot of them won't allow you. The guest account is usually for other people without being able to change any settings at all. They're not going to be able to install any apps. They're not going to be able to access any private files. It's just basically to temporarily share the computer with somebody. So you won't be using that in a mom and pop. You're not going to be using that in a Fortune 500 or any of the brick and mortar or any company, because a guest account would be just that, a temporary login for somebody to go in and basically just use the computer. They won't be able to access any private files. That basically means they shouldn't be able to even save anything on that computer. Any questions, doubts? Network configurations. We need to know that, right? Why would I need to know my network configurations? I need to know what type of network I'm connecting, right? Sometimes some of these things, when you're doing installs, especially if it's manual, it may ask you to do some settings in there and or configurations. Lastly, whether to migrate with the USMT, which is the user state migration tool. There's also the Windows Easy Transfer. We said that doesn't really work on the later models, or sorry, the later OSs. Both obviously should be captured before the upgrade or install, then deployed after the process is complete. We don't use this USMT prior to that, we will lose the data, especially if it's on the same computer that we're doing it. Any questions? Next, knowing your OS versions. You have the Windows Starter, Home Basic, Home Premium, Professional, Enterprise, and Ultimate. Windows 8 has Windows 8, Pro, Enterprise, and the RT. Lastly is the Windows 10. And Windows 10 has, if you notice, again, Home. Windows 8 didn't. Windows 10 Pro, Windows 10 Enterprise, Windows 10 Enterprise LTSB, and Windows Education. Anybody know what Windows 8, Windows RT mean? This is the one that they started using on the Windows Surface back when it first started coming out. It's meant more focused for the tablets. I think the other name that, or the full name is Windows Runtime, is the full name of Windows RT. Windows Enterprise obviously are the ones for your actual businesses. Those one Professional is also used throughout some of these businesses, depending on what licenses you want and or features. On each one, it has more bells and whistles depending what you buy. Any questions on the different versions? Your clean install steps. Jordan, if you can help me out here.
There can be many issues and pitfalls when installing an operating system, some of which may require another attempt to install. Doing a thorough inspection of the system before starting the install might alleviate some of these issues. Steps to perform a clean install or do a boot. If no OS is installed on PC, load the bootable media, disk, external drive, or USB, following prompts. If OS is already installed on PC, everything on the hard drive will be erased and replaced with a clean new version of Windows, unless a dual boot choice is made. This will place two operating systems on the same computer, and the user will need to choose one OS or the other, so Boot Manager will know which OS to load. Installing a 64-bit OS when a 32-bit OS is already installed can only be accomplished first if the actual system architecture allows it. This must be a clean install and never an in-place upgrade.
Questions or doubts? So, what are the three main situations that will require a new install? Want a brand new install?
I can think of a few situations where you need to do that.
Crash? A full system crash, possibly?
Okay. When you need a brand new clean install, be that it's a system crash. Okay.
Maybe, yeah, like a virus or something.
Replacing a drive, maybe? How about if I replace a drive? Can I just copy everything from one drive to the other? Upgrading the drive. I want to put a brand new drive in there, much bigger. Can I just do a copy and paste? Another one they just told us was here, right? This is going to require a new install if you're going from 32 to 64. Not let you upgrade. Any questions or doubts? So from the unattended installs, when do you consider, you might consider using an unintended install?
Probably in a big company where you just have to constantly get duplicate computers rolling.
Everyone agree?
Yes.
That's the great feature with unintended installs. So when you're doing PC lifecycle, I don't know if you guys ever heard of that. You guys ever heard of PC lifecycle?
I heard about it, but I'm not
I've heard of it.
100% sure what it is.
PC lifecycle is a solution that companies are using because just pretend company ABC just started this year today. The usual accounting method of doing things is these type of equipment will last you about 5 years for a computer, 3 years for a laptop. Just imagine if I go and purchase 500 computers right now because I'm starting up fine and dandy, but 5 years from now, would it be feasible for me to just go and buy those 500 computers at that point and migrate all of them?
Sure.
Would it be cost effective?
It would not.
So PC lifecycle is a solution that they've created. So they'll go and they'll decide, all right, we're running out of time. So who are the people that are really suffering right now? It's the third year, not the fourth. It's not the fourth or the fifth year. We'll start hitting up some of those computers now. Let's buy some of those now. So now I got 100. I had 100 computers that are inside this help desk. Imagine if I had to go and answer each and every computer, each and every question, compared to if I could just turn on all those computers, put a USB, let them boot up onto the network, take off the USB and keep on going to every single next PC. You can see that's going to be much faster than me going one by one and attending to make sure they all get installed. Putting in the CD manually, because some of them we said we could do with Pixie Boot too, right? Depending on the flavor we have of unattended. Therefore, obviously, the unattended will help you when you're doing mass installations. That is a great feature. And obviously for those people that love to be lazy. Any questions, doubts? After we do our installation, we need to verify any third-party drivers. As we know, when we upgrade, just as we heard on the phones, and we do the iOS, we may have problems with the driver's compatibilities and or apps. One of the main things we need to check is the activation of Windows. Don't think just because you had the previous Windows, you can go ahead and install any other Windows you want. You must activate your license, otherwise it will eventually kick you out. In the corporate environment, most of those licenses are purchased, so you won't have to worry too much about that. But obviously in the mom and pop or non-Fortune 500 companies, they don't usually have all those enterprise per se Windows. They'll probably have Windows Pro or regular Windows. Any questions or doubts? Ah,
Before you install Windows, you need to carefully examine the location
Following this operating system.
Oh, that was a quick
To
video.
install Windows, you need to carefully examine the location where you'll be installing this operating system. What drive is in this system now? Is the drive empty or does it have data already on it? You need to understand exactly what's on this storage drive because there's a potential you could be overwriting everything on that drive during the installation process. If the drive isn't very large or the user directory doesn't happen to be too overwhelming, you may want to back up that data just in case. You don't want to be in a position where there were important files on that drive, they were overwritten during the installation process, and now there's no way to recover that information. The actual partitioning and formatting of the drive will occur during the installation itself, so there's no additional prep that you'll need to do to this storage drive. As long as you've backed up all of your data, you're now ready to install onto that storage device. Before even starting the installation, there's still a lot of work that you can do to make sure the installation is going to go smoothly. The first thing is to check the minimum operating system requirements for memory, disk space, and any other hardware you might be using on that system. There's a hardware compatibility check that you can run directly from the Windows installation media. In Windows 10, this is called the Windows 10 Upgrade Checker. It will automatically check your hardware and let you know if it's ready to install Windows 10. During the installation process, you'll have a number of questions you have to answer. You'll need to know which drive and partition you want to install this operating system, and you may be asked for license key information during the installation as well. You also want to check to make sure that the applications you're using in your existing operating system will work properly in your new operating system. Just because you're moving from one Windows version to another doesn't mean that your applications will be compatible across both of those different versions of Windows. If there's an existing version of Windows on this drive and you're moving to a new version of Windows, you may be able to perform an upgrade. The upgrade will keep all of your files in place and simply install the new version of Windows on top of it. If an upgrade path is not available, you'll have to delete everything on the drive and install a new version of Windows from scratch. If you are upgrading, you'll be able to keep all of the configurations that are on that system today. And if there are any local user accounts, all of those user accounts will be available once the system is upgraded. This can save you an enormous amount of time. You won't have to install any of the applications. You won't have to rebuild any of the user account information, and all of the data will be there waiting after the installation is done. This is something you can do very quickly from a USB drive or a DVD-ROM. You would simply run that upgrade directly from the installation media. If you are performing an in-place upgrade, you're keeping all of your applications and all of your documents in place. To perform this upgrade, you would plug in your USB drive or install your DVD-ROM and then launch the setup from inside your existing operating system. With a clean install, you're deleting everything that's on that partition and you're reinstalling Windows from a brand new configuration. To be able to start a clean installation, you would install your USB drive or DVD-ROM with your installation media, and then you would boot the system using that media. If you purchased an upgrade to Windows 10, you can download that version directly from Microsoft, and Microsoft includes a media creation tool that will install the Windows 10 upgrade onto your USB drive. One important consideration about an upgrade is you cannot upgrade from a 32-bit version to a 64-bit version of Windows, and you can't upgrade from a 64-bit version to a 32-bit version of Windows. To be able to perform that type of upgrade, you would need to use a Windows migration tool and be able to copy off all of your information, perform the upgrade, and then copy everything back onto that system. There are a number of different options when upgrading from Windows 7 to Windows 10. To upgrade to Windows 10 Home, you would need to be running Windows 7 Starter, Windows 7 Home Basic, or Windows 7 Home Premium. If you wanted to upgrade to Windows 10 Pro, you would need to be running all of those, or you'd need to be running Windows 7 Professional or Windows 7 Ultimate. To be able to upgrade to Windows 10 Enterprise, you would need to either be running Windows 7 Professional or Windows 7 Enterprise. If you're not running those particular combinations, you'll need to perform a clean install to be able to move from Windows 7 to Windows 10. To upgrade from Windows 8.1 to Windows 10, you would need to be running Windows 8.1 Core to be able to upgrade to Windows 10 Home or Windows 10 Pro. If you're already running Windows 8.1 Professional, you can upgrade to Windows 10 Pro or Windows 10 Enterprise. And if you're running Windows 8.1 Enterprise, your only option is to upgrade to Windows 10 Enterprise. This is the Windows 10 installation program, and it's a very similar installation whether you're installing Windows 7, Windows 8, or Windows 10. You'll be presented with this main screen once you boot from the Windows installation media, asking you for the language, the time and currency format, and the keyboard or input method. Those are correct, so we're going to press Next to continue to the next screen. On the next screen, you have two options available. One is to install now, and the other is to repair your computer. We're going to perform an installation in this video, but in the troubleshooting section, we'll look at the different options available in that repair your computer link. Right now, though, let's click Install Now. If you're installing Windows for the first time, you'll be asked to activate Windows with your product key. You would put the product key in at the prompt and press the Next option. You'll then be presented with the licensing terms. You'll want to read through those terms, click that you accept the license terms, and click Next to continue. You're then asked if you want to upgrade the existing version of Windows on this computer or if you want to install Windows only. In my particular case, there's no existing version of Windows to upgrade, so I'm going to choose to install a new version. Windows then presents me with the partitioning options, and you can see that I have a single 60 gig drive that is completely unpartitioned. There is unallocated space on the entire drive. So I'll click the New option, and I'll use the entire drive to be able to install the Windows operating system into that single partition. When I click Apply, Windows will say, to ensure that all Windows features work correctly, Windows might create additional partitions for system files. This is mostly for your recovery partition so that you won't need this additional installation media later down the road for troubleshooting. I'll click OK. The Windows installation program has created 4 separate partitions for this Windows 10 installation. The first is a 500 meg partition for our recovery partition. We have a 100 meg partition as a system partition, and then we have a 16 meg partition as a Windows reserved partition. Microsoft may use this partition for other purposes later on. The primary partition is this 59.4 gig partition, and that is the partition I'd like to install Windows. I'll make sure that it's selected, and we'll click Next. At this point, Windows starts copying the files that it will need to complete the installation process. Now that Windows has copied the files that it needs, it will reboot the system to complete the installation. I'm going to choose United States with our mouse, and we'll have Windows continue the installation. Our keyboard layout is the United States keyboard layout. I do not want to add a second keyboard layout. You then have the option to configure this for personal use, for a system you might have at home, or for an organization. And they make the note that your organization will have full control over this device. In my configuration, I'm going to set this up for personal use. At this point, you can use your Microsoft account for your authentication into this system. You also have the option to create an offline account that doesn't use this Microsoft account. If you're choosing an offline account, you can choose the name that you would like to use on this computer. I'll choose Professor. You're then prompted to create a super memorable password. You want to be sure to remember your username and password the next time you have to authenticate. To be able to recover from this offline account, you'll need to create security questions. So you'll be prompted to create 3 separate security questions for this system. You're then given the option to use Cortana as your personal assistant. You can choose to enable it or disable it from this screen. Windows also gives you the option for the privacy settings that you'd like to use. This includes Cortana's speech recognition, finding your device, diagnostic data, and more. At this point, Windows has everything it needs to be able to complete the installation process. And now our Windows 10 installation is complete, and we can begin using the operating system. Although the base installation is complete, we still want to check the operating system and make sure everything is running as we expect. If you did run into problems during the installation process, you want to perform the normal troubleshooting to see if you can resolve some of those issues. But there are still things that need to be done with the operating system itself. We need to make sure we have all of the latest service packs and security patches so that we know our operating system is up to date and secure from any vulnerabilities. We also want to be sure we have the latest drivers running, especially if we're now running a new version of an operating system, and check to make sure that you're using the latest applications so that you know they'll work properly in your new OS.
Any questions on his explanation there of what we just reviewed? Brief installation.
So it's making 4 partitions, right?
Who's making 4 partitions?
Windows 10. Because I saw an installation that, yeah, you have the drive, and then I saw 5 partitions: the reserve, the primary, the recovery.
It all depends on what you choose.
Depends on what you
Not
choose.
always. I don't think it always creates 4 or 10 all those partitions. And his feature and the one that he did was a ground up installation, wasn't an upgrade. If I would upgrade, would it be doing all those partitions?
Probably not. Probably wouldn't need a petition if it's upgrading, most likely.
Mm-hmm. How's it clean slate install, blank install of Windows 10 that he was doing? Upgrade pass. You have your upgrade OS advisor. Obviously, the purpose of this, Microsoft created it, obviously, to alleviate all the issues with people not knowing what in the world they're doing. It advises on known compatibility issues from one to the other, and it may resolve some of the issues that are found. It gives recommendations before you upgrade in the actual planning processes. Accessing it was first seen in Windows Vista, but you can download it from Microsoft website. Questions from the Windows Upgrade OS Advisor. Your upgrade pass Windows Anytime upgrade is another tool helpful for upgrading itself. You'll notice here you can go online and choose it and download it if you want to upgrade from them up there in the cloud. Any questions? Upgrade requirements from Vista to Windows 7. You have your Home Basic. It's able to install from Home Basic, Home Premium, and Ultimate. The Premium will allow you to install on Home Premium and Ultimate. That's upgrading. Obviously, you could always do a clean install of any Windows. These are the only features you can do. If you'll notice, the higher you go up, the more likely that you can't go backwards. So the more basic you are, starting with, you're able to upgrade to a higher level. But when you're up here, you can't downgrade to a lower level. It's the easiest way to remember it. Any questions or doubts on Windows Vista to Windows 7? The upgrade requirements. Next is your 7 to 8. You have the starter, which installs on the Windows or the Windows 8 Pro. Your Home Basic installs again Windows 8 or Windows 8 Pro. Why not Windows 8 Home? Why can't I install on Windows 8 Home? From Windows 7 Home Basic or Home Premium, why can't I install onto Windows 8 Home? Anyone? Hello. Come on, guys, I told you earlier. He's the only one with what? There's no such thing as Windows Home for the version 8. You guys got to be fully aware of that. There's no such thing as Windows Home on the version 8. The reason why you can't migrate to Home, because there's no such thing. Next one is a professional. You can go to professional and enterprise. Again, enterprise can go up to enterprise, and ultimate can go to pro. This is the only time that you'll see this, where ultimate can go to pro instead of ultimate to ultimate. Questions or doubts on the upgrade requirements? Next slide. For the 8.1, you have the Windows 7, 8, and 8.1. here on this side versus the 8.1. The previous one was 8 Pelao. That's the Metro UI one, if you guys remember, versus the 8.1. So you have the Windows 7. You can only migrate directly to the 8.1. Windows 8 can go to 8.1 and 8.1 Pro. Windows 8 Pro can go to Pro 8.1 Enterprise. And you have Windows 8 Pro Media Center can go to Pro or Enterprise. And again, 8 Enterprise can go to Pro or Enterprise. Windows 8.1 can go to Windows 8.1 Pro. And lastly, 8.1 Pro can be upgraded to Windows 8.1 Enterprise. One key thing that they told us here, though, you could upgrade from 7 to 8.1, but what does it say we can't keep? I mean, that we can keep and not keep? Is what I'm going to say. We can keep something, but we can't keep the other.
Can't keep the applications.
Correct. Be fully aware of that. You'll be able to keep all the user's actual files. But as for Word or any other application you have installed, you will have to install the 8.1 version for 8.1, Windows 8.1. The other note that they put here was for this one over here with the little 2, the 8.1 Pro from Windows 8. You can upgrade 8.1 with 1 or 2 methods, through the store or via an upgrade media like a Windows disk. You can change your versions via upgrade media. Installing through Windows stores locks you into previous edition. In other words, you had previous edition. Questions, doubts? Lastly, your requirements for Windows 10. Starting from your starter. Anyone know who Windows 7 starter is? You ever heard of that guy?
It sounds like a free trial. The starter.
It is well, you can say it is, but it is the basic, most is even more basic than home basic. It doesn't for instance, I don't know how I can tell you. Just doesn't have as much of the features. Remember, the higher you go, the more features you have. You can go into domain versus into work groups and all that stuff. So depending on what you want, that is the cheapest. Cheapest one is Windows 7 Starter. It has the least versions. Any questions or doubts on the starter? So from starter, you can go to Home, Windows Home, which appeared again on Windows 10. God only knows why it disappeared on Windows 8. Can't do the other way, though. You'll notice here on Windows 10, it gets a little bit harder versus all the other ones. Remember, I kept on telling you, you can actually upgrade to the higher versions on these, but when you get to Windows 10, look what happens. You have the Home Basic, you can do Home, you can do Home Premium, yes. You can do same thing with the 8, yes, but you can't use the Pro. You can't upgrade to Pro. You can install Pro, but you can't upgrade to it. Then you have Windows Professional. You can't, obviously we know we can't downgrade. We're fully aware of that one. That rule still applies. Can't downgrade to Home. You can install, obviously, Professional, but you cannot install Education, different license. The Windows 7 Ultimate, once again, you can go to Pro, but you can't go to Education. And lastly, over here, you have the two Windows 8 and 8.1 with the two flavors of Education and Pro. And Education can migrate to Pro and can migrate to Education. And lastly, Pro can only go to Pro. Doubts? Questions? Okay. Troubleshooting. Help me read this one, Lázaro. You're on mute. Software. There you go.
Hello? Troubleshooting installation problems. The installation process itself almost never fails. Usually something else fails during the process that is generally interpreted as install failure. Media error, scratch DVD, RAID array not detected, driver issues, not boot device present. Either bad CD or CMOS is not set to look at the optical drive first. Hardware detection error, check compatibility beforehand. Lockup, unplug PC and turn it back on, boot into system and return the installation. Windows will restart the installation automatically.
Thank you. Any questions or doubts on this troubleshooting problems, installation problems? Okay. Oh, here comes the end. Number Juan. Which type of OS should you install for best performance when you have enough RAM? An 8-bit operating system, 16-bit operating system, 32-bit operating system, or a 64-bit?
64.
Everyone agree? Hello?
People are nodding their heads. I guess you can't
Oh.
see them.
No, I can't see them. It's so silent. So, anybody want to take a wild guess? What's the limitation of RAM in an 8-bit operating system? I told you guys how to do this. So how did I find out? Every time, even if I forget, what's the limitation of a 32-bit? How
Is
do
it
computers
4?
talk? How do computers talk? In what language? I'll give you that much of a hint. What's the most basic language that it must speak in? Only way it talks.
Language, referred to as zeros and ones.
Binary, right? Therefore, if I come into my computer and if I ever forget, I can do this guy right here and it will let me and remind me that it is a total of 4 gigs. If I come in here to an 8-bit operating system, 256 is the RAM. Make sense? That's the most the operating system can run. And that's why if you buy on a 32-bit system more than 4 gigs, you're wasting your money. Compared to this one, 2 to the 64th is obviously 19 zeros down here. So that's a pretty big amount of RAM before the operating system will run out of usable RAM. Questions or doubts on how I would figure out which was a faster one if I had any doubts? Obviously, we know that's 64-bit, but we need to understand why. Next one, number 2. Stina, if you can read it for me.
What type of installation should you perform if you want to install a 64-bit version of Windows on a computer that already has a 32-bit OS installed?
Well, what can I
A
do?
clean install.
Everyone agree?
I agree.
Correct. That is a requirement, as we said. If you're going from 32 to 64, unfortunately, back up and do a clean install. Next one. Alexa, number 3.
Which edition of Windows 7 only offers the 32-bit version? B.
Everybody agree?
I agree.
That is correct. Windows 7 Starter Edition. Well, was one of the things I failed to mention. On top of that, it doesn't have almost anything in it. The only flavor it comes in is 32-bit. Forgot to mention that one as a key thing about it. On top of that, you're missing a whole bunch of features. You also can't do a 64. Any questions, doubts? Next one, number 4, Justin.
Amount of RAM required to install Windows 10 Pro, which is 64 bits. That would be B, 2 gigabytes.
Everyone agree?
Yes.
I agree.
That is the minimum, right? The other one, if it was a 32-bit, we said was how much?
1
1
gig.
gig.
That's right. Number 5, Carlos.
Give me, sorry, I had like a background noise.
Mhm.
Which installation option during the installation of Windows 10 will format the drive? Format the drive. Would that be B? Or no. What does it mean by format the drive?
Which installation will actually format a drive? Do you remember what formatting a drive does?
If you can like help me, I have like a vague memory right now about it right now.
Formatting a drive is when you it's the part where you actually put the system. Let's see, we can another way. There's partitioning, which actually partitions the space, and formatting is actually the actual format of the drive. Let me see, what other words can I use except for the word format? I have no idea. What other word can I use as format? Anybody know? Not much more friendlier way than using the word format.
Takes a part of your data or saved data or part of your disk.
Yeah. So
The arrangement.
you do realize partition means that I mark this much space. When I partition a drive, I say this much space I'm reserving for this part of the drive. When I format it, is basically when
Configuration.
you put like, yeah, your NTFS files or your FAT32. It's what you do to configure the actual drive. If it's going to be on a FAT32 partition or if it's going to be on NTFS partition, it sets up the file system on the drive. One is just allocating how much space is being reserved, and one is actually formatting it so that it can talk. If I don't format a drive, I will not be able to talk to the drive. We'll understand anything.
All right, let's see. No, it wouldn't be clean. It wouldn't be D, and I said B.
An upgrade would actually just keep everything, wouldn't it? When you upgrade, doesn't it keep the existing files, the programs? So would I be formatting and cleaning everything off and doing a brand new? We saw him do it in the custom earlier. I'll give you that much of a clue in the video. Oh, no, I just said the answer. In the video that he was doing a what? A
Clean install.
custom install, actually, right? It was a clean install, but it was custom. You customized it. In there is when it will format it itself. Even on a brand new install, if it's a clean install, sometimes if you're not customizing it, it's going to ask you to partition the drive. Not always, depending on Windows. But the one that they did show us in that video was the custom install.
Oh.
Any questions or doubts? All right. Let's see. Pretty much finishes up that session. You guys have the lab for a clean install of Windows and you have SANTB. Who was